Hello, everyone. This is your host, Gemma Putty, bringing vibrant living conversations from North Idaho and across this region. I'm so excited to chat with the entrepreneurs, creatives, and believers as we journey together to connect more deeply to ourselves, our earth, and our communities. Today, I get to talk with Jennifer Hackenbruch. As I know Jennifer as my shamanic healer, yet she has various degrees in health, fitness, and education. Is an interfaith minister, loves to travel, and is the spiritual care coordinator and chaplain at the Hospice of North Idaho. When I usually see Jennifer, we're talking about all of my struggles. So today I'm thrilled to get to interview her. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. I'm excited.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to start with, what would be your elevator pitch for what you do as far as shamanic healing goes?
It is, I work with people on the energetic level to remove those things, blocks, whatever it is we've been carrying that are tripping them up, that they're in their way. And, you know, that one thing, that lesson that keeps coming over and over and over again, but you can't quite get beyond it. We go in and work energetically and remove the imprint. So that's basically my my spiel. So it's energetic release techniques.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, well, and I guess we'll use that as a little teaser because we'll get more back to that. But I mean, you've got obviously a long story before. So how did you even get to this point? Do you want to give us your story of you started in Detroit even, and then how to get to where you are now doing shamanic healing and whatnot?
Well, I was born in Detroit, and then when I was 5, my parents moved up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and it is a little slice of heaven that I don't ever want to live in again, but I enjoyed it for the time being. And it was interesting, you know, my mother was agnostic, and my father was raised Catholic, but became an evangelical, born-again Christian. So I was raised with kind of these two aspects, you know, the poet, agnostic, and then my father with the whole heaven and hell, authoritarian type Christian. And it's interesting. So that kind of started my view on what is God. And for a while I practiced being an atheist, and that only worked for, you know, maybe 6 months. And then when I was 26 years old, I went out west for the first time and went into the mountains. And it was on that trip that I realized that God was something way more than I could ever imagine or even try and put in a box. You know, it was no longer this bearded man in the sky. And after that, it kind of started me on a quest. You know, I was in undergrad at that time studying health and fitness management with a background in psychology. And after that, I left Upper Michigan and moved to Missoula, Montana, sight unseen, to go to grad school. And at this point, I'm about 30 years old. And I don't know, I just kind of started seeking, you know, I got into a lot of what I would call woo-woo spirituality. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's awesome. And it taught me and opened me up so much to what, you know, spirituality was. And, you know, I graduated 2 years later with my master's degree in health promotion or health education, and couldn't find a job. And I didn't want to leave Montana. But that voice, that inner, you know, knowing, and that voice said, you know, sell your stuff, pack your car, and just go hit the road. So I did, and I traveled for 7 months, and just going from place, I camped, I stayed in hostels, I met great people. When my money started running low, some weird job or weird thing would happen where I'd make some money and I could keep going. And I ended up back in Upper Michigan with my mother, and everything that I was kind of being led to do, like these spiritual women's circles and stuff like that. And it just wasn't bringing in, you know, any kind of money. And I'm just like, I can't get stuck in Upper Michigan. And I really had it out with God one night. And I seriously, you know, kind of cried like a 5-year-old. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? And I cried myself to sleep. And I woke up that morning, and it was there were 2 beds in that room. And it was as if you were sitting on the other bed and said to me, go back to school and become an ordained minister. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, started laughing, and I'm like, you're a funny God. And, you know, because my father, it wasn't a great, easy relationship with my dad. And I always thought he was a little bit crazy and cuckoo with his spirituality. And I'm like, I didn't want my family to think that I was like all crazy and cuckoo either. And I didn't want myself to think that. So it was more about me than it was anybody else. But then shortly after that, I ended up going down to Florida, and I'm like, well, I'm in the Bible Belt, so what does it mean? You know, I didn't even know what being an ordained minister was. So I went and talked to any minister that would talk to me and asked them questions. And at that time, I had applied for a job in Missoula, but left before the interview. I just decided I have to go on this trip. I'm just letting it go. Well, the person they hired didn't work out, so they called me and offered me the job.
Wow.
And so I'm like, okay. And I took a few more weeks and then drove back to Montana. And it was after I'd gotten back during meditation, I was just like, okay, you said, you know, go back to school and become an ordained minister. And I was paging through this magazine called Spirituality and Health. And there was an advertisement for the new seminary in New York City. And the tagline was, always in addition to, never instead of. And that caught me. I'm like, this is it. This is the program I'm going to go in. Because I knew if I went into a really traditional mode of spirituality, I would turn off people like myself.
Right.
And I also knew that if I went into the woo-woo way of spirituality, I would turn off a whole group of other people. And so this just seemed like the perfect middle of the road. It was an interfaith ministry program. And that was in 2003. And it took me 3 years to get there. And my mother died during that time. And so I went and traveled some more. After she died, I spent 5 months traveling abroad. And then I moved to New York City. Wow. And rented a tiny apartment, or not even an apartment, a room that was about the size of a closet. And that's when I started going to seminary school and got involved in a Science of Mind church, and really kind of changed my life with how we create and how we create our worlds and what God is and what God isn't. So
when you say woo-woo, what do you mean by that? Like how do you?
I know that's a really good thing. I'm not even sure exactly what I mean by woo-woo. I guess that, I don't even know how to explain it. You know, it's more of like with no necessarily, it's just more of spirit, universe, more just the spirit's out there. And it's not, I don't even know really how to explain it. And I'm probably going to upset some people, but it's not, yeah, I don't know how to put my finger on it.
No, I think it's interesting because I describe myself as woo-woo in a way. I mean, I was raised in the UK, and it was, I mean, we went to church when I was younger, and I knew the Bible stories, but it wasn't a huge part of my life. And then, you know, we went on Easter and Christmas, and it was very like check the box, but fun. Like I enjoyed it. It was definitely traditions. And then we moved to Kansas, the Bible Belt. And then, I mean, I was 12 at the time, so it was like middle school, everyone's going to Sunday school and church camp. So I got like into Christianity very, like I was like leading FCA, and then some things happened that I was looking at people and things just weren't lining up, that I completely fell back and was like, oh, this isn't working. And I wouldn't say I was atheist at any point, but I just wasn't, it was nothing. And then I found yoga, which I needed yoga in my life, which then led me back to, I mean, I used universe. I talk to nature. That's where, you know, like you're saying, when I'm out in the mountains and the trees and by the lakes around here, that's where I feel connected and grounded. And I think if anyone was to ask me what my spiritual beliefs were, I mean, I kind of used the term woo-woo to, you know, like, I don't really know. I don't go to a building to find my connection, but I believe that there's so many different ways to be able to find your connection. So it is interesting. I was just curious, but no pressure to define it because I can't either.
I guess when I use woo-woo, it's anything but, I guess, organized religion. You know, in a sense, it is nature-based. It could be
Yeah.
pagan, it could be Wiccan, it could be any of that.
No, that's a really
Um,
good, yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
No, for sure.
And I mean, no offense, because I still refer to myself a little bit as woo-woo.
Right. Yeah, no, not to.
But I have great reverence for Christianity and any other religion that somebody's holding
Right.
and walking with. Yeah.
No, agreed. Higher power, however you connect to your higher power, I think I'm
And
open.
God can be she, he, goddess, you know, or no gender at all. It's just so much bigger than
Right.
I think what we give it credit for.
Right. Yeah, and some at that point I don't need to define it, right? It's like
Yeah.
yes, but it's beautiful. So you were in New York,
Mhm.
and you've been ordained, and then how did you end up back here?
How did I end up back here? It was interesting. One of the men that I was going to seminary work with, he would just like, every time he'd see me, he'd start to laugh, and I'm like, what? And he's like, the trees are calling. And then finally, like our last, and I kind of knew, and I'm like, finally, like our last retreat, and I'm like, all right, Anthony, what are they saying? And he's like, come home. And so I was ordained in June, and I was moving back to Montana in July.
Nice.
So maybe like end of July, beginning of August. And so I loved New York. There's an energy of New York that I have felt like nowhere else. And, you know, you'd go across the George Washington Bridge and you'd feel it about halfway. And then if you were heading to New Jersey across the bridge, it would just disappear. And I don't know what it was. But my thing was, I don't move fast enough for New York. Even like homeless people would call me out. They're like, hey, lady, you ain't meant to be moving that fast. And I would be like, all right, I'm waiting for a movie, you know?
No, I thought I was a big city person, and I agree. I love New York, but I
Mhm.
love visiting New York now. I love exactly the energy that you're talking about. And then exactly, come back to the trees and the lakes and
Yeah, and
awesome.
that connection.
Yeah.
One thing, you know, that I didn't mention that I got involved in before I left was this community called the Naraya community, and they would do a Naraya dance, and it's an ancient, and forgive me if I don't explain it correctly, it's an ancient Shoshone dance, and I believe it came out around the same time as a ghost dance, or maybe even before. And it's a 3-day dance where you dance around the tree of life. And I did that right before I left on my trip. I did it in New York during my trip, you know, and it was just, it got me very fascinated into the indigenous traditions. And so that was another thing that, you know, pushed me into my interfaith, you know, because that's where I'm like, I'm an interfaith minister. It's like, I believe it all and none of it all at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know, so you became ordained,
Hmm.
but then I know we've talked a little bit that you took a couple of Reikis. You've um, obviously now you were trained in Peru, right?
No, my teacher's teacher was trained in Peru. He spent 25 years actually in the Amazon, and not just in Peru, but studying with a number of different shamans. And his job really was to train and learn with them and then bring it back to the West.
Nice.
And the story goes, when the conquistadors came over, these medicine men and women knew that they would lose their medicine. So they went up into the hills, they went up into the mountains and stayed there for 500 years.
Wow.
And then just, I guess, 80 years ago or something, they came down. They came down off the mountain, and they knew that they had to bring it to the West, but they weren't going to be the medicine men and women to do that, that they had to bring Westerners in to share these traditions and these medicines because we need it right now.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. I'm chills.
Yeah.
So when was that? Was that when you were doing your seminary? Is that when you were getting that? Or how does
No,
that fall
no.
into your story? I was about to say, I'm like, I don't, that
Okay.
doesn't add up.
So I was ordained in 2008. I moved back to Montana in 2008. And, and then I worked in a fitness club and did a lot of, personal training and group fitness and taught at the university and all this. And then I just got a little antsy. It's just like, all right, what's next? And I ended up moving to Northern California for a while, and I worked on an organic farm. And it was during that time that I was really close to this place called Heartwood, which was it was basically a massage school and massage community, but it's a area where people come and do workshops and stuff on spiritual things. And it was just a really neat place. And they had the Kiro coming in from Peru, actually. And I didn't go. I was so close and I didn't go. But like one morning, I'm stone cold sober. I mean, this was not anything. I just woke up and I looked out my van window and there was this native person, and big teeth, smiling at me and waving. And I just smiled at him and waved back. And then he just went. And I'm like, and I nodded. I was like, okay, yes. And I'm like, what was I getting myself into? And so this was, I guess it was 2012. I had just gotten back from India. And I was, hanging out with my friends on this farm. And then I came back to Missoula and went to Sandpoint and to visit a friend. And I met my husband there. And he showed me his mesa. And it's his prayer bundle. And it contains 13 stones. And I just knew, I looked at it and I'm like, I want one. And I knew nothing about it. I don't know where that desire came from, but I knew. And so he put me in contact with his teacher, and my teacher, Berta Canal, and she's in Sandpoint. And she was going to be doing a medicine wheel, which is a transformational journey around the medicine wheel. And this is where you build your mesa. And your mesa is basically your personal medicine bundle or prayer bundle. So, I put it in, from like the Naraya where we put all our prayers into a bundle, so now I'm carrying that in as well. So it seemed like all these pieces fit together. And I was working with people in Sandpoint and doing sweats with them. And Chris was involved with them as well. And I met all these people in California.
Okay.
And that's actually how I ended up in Sandpoint, and then taking her class started in the fall of 2013.
Okay. Wow. I have so many questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's how it found me. It's not like I picked this modality, but there were just some things kind of lining up. And then I saw pictures of the Kiro, these medicine men and women out of Peru. And I'm like, that's exactly who came to me.
Yeah.
It's like they had the hat on and everything, and I'd never seen them before. So, yeah.
It is beautiful how the stories, it came to you. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So where did your Reiki training fall into this? I'm just curious because you obviously
Actually,
a couple of different.
Yeah, right. That I did. I started that. I did level 1 in Missoula. In 2001 or 2 maybe. And my teacher from there, Kurt, I'm not recalling Kurt's last name, but anyway, he offered, and we're like, yeah. And so my girlfriend Sarah and I trained with him, and we did the first level. And then when I was in New York, my dean of students, she was a Reiki master, and she was doing a level 2 class. And so I took level 2 with her.
Okay.
And she was coming at a little different angle, but it's all that universal energy. And so, yeah.
Well, and I think this might all play into, so then, I've seen you, I think I saw you for the first time we figured it was the end of last year, right? It was like November.
Right. I think so, yeah.
So each session, I heard of you. I was, one of my friends actually told me, because her and I, we go to lunch, and once you get talking to me long enough, you realize that I love talking about this stuff. So Ashley, funny, she was like, well, I know you were talking about wanting to find an energy person, because since I moved here from Salt Lake in 2016, 17, and I had seen someone in Salt Lake. And so here, it takes a while, right? You don't want someone messing with your energy that you don't trust or hasn't been
Right.
referred to you.
Well, you don't.
So when Ashley told me about you, I was like, okay, perfect. So I'm like texting you like, Jennifer, let's have a session. Um, so will you talk us through just how you go about each session? Because I know you
Yeah.
personalize it to who you're talking to.
So I'm going to back up for a second
Okay,
before I answer that. I did that transformational journey is, it's a personal journey, and it's about learning to do your own work and to take care of yourself when stuff comes up. And it really works a lot with the triangle of disempowerment, where we come in as either the victim, the perpetrator, or the rescuer. And we all play that role. Some of us play different roles. I was a beautiful victim. And, so we did a lot of work with working with that. And so there's 4 rounds. So we enter in the south, then we move into the west, and then we move into the north, and then end up in the east. And the south is that identification. I'm going to identify all these parts of myself, whether, I'm the victim or this or that, whatever it is we're playing, what is so-and-so doing to me? And that work is really just kind of turning it around. It's like, how am I calling that into myself so I can learn and grow and claim all these gifts that I've been growing this whole time? And I'm just going to keep up with the victim analogy. And after that, then you move into the West, which is differentiation. So now it's like, all right, I've got all these parts of me. I don't want to play the victim or the perpetrator anymore, but, wife and student and this, and healer, it's like, I want to keep all that, so it's just kind of differentiating the pieces. So you're kind of claiming and, what am I going to keep? What am I going to bring in? And then we move into the North, and that's this place of integration. And that integration is, I grew all these wonderful gifts as a victim, like independence, how to take care of myself, self-care, and, whatever else it was that I was growing, playing this part. And victim's not the only piece, but like I said, I'm just using it. And then we move into the East, which is not transmutation or transformation, but maybe more transformation. And it's when it's like we have now walked with it, and it's just like I don't even walk with that piece anymore. Whether it is I came in, and it's like my reason is I can't get ahead at work, and I'm always getting demoted, and blah blah blah. And then you walk it through and you work it, and you're like, wow, that's not even a thing anymore. You come in for your next session and you ask, oh no, that's not even a deal. I want to talk about this part now. And it's constant, this walk around the medicine wheel. And when I was in the South, the East during my first round, it was that voice again, that really clear. It's like, you're going through 3 more times. And I'm like, really? And so I did. So I took, from 2013 to 2017, those 4 years, I did the medicine wheel 4 years in a row. And, so then the first year I started in the South, and then the second year, it's like I started in differentiation. The third year it was in integration. And then the fourth, the transformation.
So when you did the medicine wheel, do you mean that it took you the year to like consciously do the self work and intentionally go through to flush out the same pieces?
Yeah. Okay. And you learn all these little tools to do your own work. And like I said, you get rights, these medicine men and women have passed down rights. And so you receive these rights that you then walk with and heal with.
Okay, awesome.
It's really, it's so much, it's hard to explain, and I don't want it to, downplay it at all. So anyway, after that first, that 4 years, it's like I took a break. We moved to Coeur d'Alene, and I started working with hospice and spiritual care. And I'm like, this is my focus, and I needed to focus on that. And then my teacher, for the first time, offered a practitioner's training. So those 4 years was just all about me and self-work. And it's not that I couldn't do something with somebody else, just a little bit here and there to help them move something that might be blocking them or tripping them up. But the true work or practitioner work, it was another year-long journey. So then I had to take the medicine wheel again, personal journey, and then follow it right up with then the practitioner work. And so in a session, basically, client will come in, and what is that piece that wants to move? That question of what's blocking me, what keeps happening over and over and over again? Why do I keep attracting the same man over and over again that does the same thing to me? Why can't I move ahead in my job? Why, all of these things that might be tripping us up or blocking us. So basically, in one session, we might start in the south and the west, and then we move it, and then you end up in the north where you're integrating. And then eventually you're going to get over into the east. But I like to leave my clients in the north to go home and to integrate what this session brought in. So now, what was your question again?
Well, I think so I mean, at the beginning, you obviously have a lot of different tools and different methods to go through this cycle with whoever you're working with. So I know in a couple of our sessions, I started and you had me draw in the sand I had rocks that I was creating a picture of how I was feeling at the beginning of the session. And we do a little chatting out when you're exactly saying, okay, what's coming up for you right now? What are your blocks? And then we've moved, I'm trying to even think. The sessions are always so
right. They are, and it's not like it's that on purpose, because it's just because we're working in the energetics. And I'll just share, like, according to Carol, we have an energy body, and it's not just that; it's everything. I mean, when you see the halo of Christ, that too is that energy body, and we all have it, and you can feel it. If somebody gets too close into your stuff, into your space, you feel it.
Yes.
And it's just like, whoa, especially if it's not somebody you want in your personal space, and however big that is for you. And so we work with the energetics. So this work that we do, it's not talk therapy. It's you will talk, but that's only to get to the emotion below that. So it's like, and that's what we want, because our bodies do really, really well at holding past hurts, past things that happened to us when we were, anywhere probably from 0 to 7. I bet you that's where most of our wounding comes from. And then we take care of it, and then we carry it with us. And we may, so we may have that belief that, and this is one that comes up constantly, is I'm unworthy.
Right.
That 4 years that I worked with the medicine wheel, and everybody I worked with, including myself, it's like there was a sense of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough. And it was whether it was for love, for job, for money, it was all of these things. So it's like, so if I have this underlying belief that I'm not even aware of, that I'm not worthy, so what am I going to call into my life? I'm going to call into my life situations that are going to prove to me that I'm not worthy.
Right.
So these sessions are geared up to go to that space, that place of I'm not worthy. So what happened back when you were, back, it's just like your 20s, you're, back from your 40s, 50s, 30s, 20s, teenage years, and then back to this little girl. When's that first, or little boy, when's that first time you remember that happening? There. Okay. And this whole time, you're releasing, it sounds a little kooky, but we've got these stones, and stones like dense energy. And this comes from my mesa and my, medicine bundle. And you want to get that energy, that emotion, that feeling from that little girl who felt helpless and unworthy because mom and dad did A, B, and C. And it's not that mom and dad meant to, It
Right.
just happened. So you blow it and you get it out of your body and you just keep triggering it. And then from there, and it doesn't feel good. You know, you're bringing up all these old emotions and stuff, but we work with that. And then once, you know, we get all of that into the stone, we do things like, you know, the sand painting you brought up, and that would be a sand painting. And, you know, medicine men and women change their reality by changing their perceptions.
Right.
So it's like, you know, even Thomas Edison said that. I'm like, you don't fix a problem in the same energy that it was, you know, created in. You have to go up a level. So it's like, you know, if I'm mad and this problem happened in anger, I can't fix it in anger. I actually have to like go up to a different emotion and look at it from there. And
Right.
that's kind of the same thing. So what a sand painting does is you paint this picture of your life using the sand and all these other stones, and you just, and then, you know, we go and we do this table work, and then you're able to come back to this painting and say, make the changes. What does your life look like now? And then you can make that change and then carry it with you when you walk out the door.
No, I love that. It's reframing the story. But I think what you're doing is you're really digging deep. I think, I mean, going that far back, thinking that from age 1 to 7 is when we're taking, I mean, that's that root chakra, right? We're taking on everything from the outside world, from what we're being told. We're just creating our realities being formed at that point, from being that like pure essence that we come into the world as. Then we're being shaped by all of these stories from whether it's our parents or culture or whatever it is. So it makes sense that then that's the human journey, right? Is to evolve and to create our own identity, but being able to go back to what happened to us in our childhood, that's not part of Western culture to look at, right? It's really not. So I think you
And,
tap into
and
the initial, how it's playing out now, but then you go deep and pull up that stuff. And I think even in some part of the session, you're pulling out things that I can't necessarily remember. You're releasing when I lie down, and you can then release that emotion from deeper areas that I can't even remember. Is that right?
yeah, I think so. And a lot of the work, you know, here's woo spirituality in a sense. We like to be in our heart, throat, these 4 chakras. You know, we like to be up here, woo, everything feels good, and I'm in love, and God is love, and it's so awesome. And we're going to do everything to avoid looking at our 3rd, 2nd, and 1st chakra.
Right.
This work goes into those chakras and helps clear it out so we can totally be in these places of love and joy authentically. And, you know, one of the analogies you get, it's just like, why, you're in a river. It's just like, why wouldn't I go up to the mouth of the river and make a change there? So then everything flows down my river and changes from the mouth and the root, the beginning, the source. And then it just filters down and changes everything in my life. So this work is, in a sense, you're going to the root of everything. You're pulling it up by the root, taking it out, giving it back to the earth, and then you're filling it with all those gifts that you grew, learning, and everything that you've learned as, walking, and we'll go back to the analogy of, I'm not worthy. So everything that you learned and grew, and it's like, oh yes, and we grow a lot from that belief. We can finally claim it without having to play with I'm not worthy anymore. And there are layers. I mean, this work is definitely like an onion, and you peel it back and you're like, what? This worthiness stuff is coming up again. And it's like, yep, but you started here and you're working up here. So now you're dealing it with a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And then it's a totally different ball game. And so it's really kind of hard to, explain the work, but then you're doing the work, I'm facilitating it. So when I'm working with somebody, it's like you're the one who's going down and you're getting deep and you're feeling those old emotions that we don't want to feel. I mean, none of us want to go back there. I mean, we don't want to go back to where mom or dad hit us. We don't want to go back to where, a tragic accident happened and took one of our parents, anything like that. It's like, we don't want to go back there. But if we're holding these emotions, like, that abandonment, it's like, that's another big one. It's like you get abandoned when you're young. So you can have a brother and sister, two brothers in a grocery store with their mom. Mom goes around the grocery store aisle and one brother's like, woohoo, party, I'm free. And the other one is freaking out because mom just left him and felt abandoned. Well, then boom, imprint. So now he's got this imprint that, I'm going to be abandoned. So then he creates all of these things in his life to abandonment. Lovers leave him, jobs leave him, friends leave him, and it's because of this underlying belief that he doesn't even remember that moment when mom walked across, went down the other aisle and left him. And inadvertently, she didn't, she wasn't abandoning her child. She was just grocery shopping.
Right. But that perception, right?
Right. So what are the gifts that you grew from that abandonment, and creating in every person that left you, every lover that left you or however, abandoned you in that moment, what did you grow? And that's what this work is all about, is like getting those things, those jewels, those gems that you've grown and walking with that instead of that underlying belief that nobody loves me and everybody's going to abandon me. We want to get rid of that imprint. Because, things happen into that, that energetic, luminous energy field. Imprint comes into our mental, emotional, and then it's sometimes into our physical. And this could create a lot of pain.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many, in our world today, you mentioned talk therapy, there's Reiki, tuning forks. I just talked to Derek, had an earlier podcast about he's learning tuning forks, and so there's different ways to heal. I think for me, the way I even started to get into yoga and seeking for different modalities other than talk, like very typical, like Western is what I consider talk therapy, because I didn't like talking. I found that I'm an optimist, and I found myself telling stories that was like, oh, life is good. And I just didn't like talking. I didn't want to talk about bad things that had happened or whatever it was. So then learning more about the chakras, and of course, as I was doing yoga, like that flow and feeling energy in a whole different way has led me down this path of, the lady that I saw in Salt Lake, she honestly didn't give it a name. She said, I was like, is it Reiki? What are you doing? And I feel like she was doing Reiki, but she was just going down my chakras rather than around the whole body. But anyway, there's so many different variations of this work, right? And you learning Reiki, that's more moving and clearing energy than you with this work releasing energy. Is that right?
I think Reiki is more about the healing energy. It's just like we bring Reiki in, and that universal healing energy is going to do what it's going to do.
Okay.
At least that's how I picture, coming in and then out my hands and into that person. It's not necessarily clearing anything. Okay. It's just, bringing healing to whatever needs to be healed. And that energy will do it. It's in that person's intention, that kind of, that's my understanding of Reiki. And I could be, way off, and I'm sure there's more. This work is an energetic healing as well. It's like you're moving things on the energetic level, these levels that we don't remember or we don't know that are there, and yet we walk with them every day.
Right.
And just that little bit of clearing and removing that density so we don't have to walk with it, I think is so freeing for people. That you can look at life and you could see life a little bit different. It's not as dense as it was before. It's lighter, and you move lighter. You have a pep in your step that you might not have had. And that being said, we can call it all back again if we want to. So that's where your homework comes in, because I do give homework. And
I think honestly, the homework is where it helps. It's like Shavasana, right? It's like, if you don't do the Shavasana, you're like, what's the point of doing the practice?
Right.
You need to reflect on what it means to you and how just processing yourself, because our sessions are usually like an hour, usually like an
Oh,
hour.
yeah.
But a lot is happening. So I find that doing the homework and going back and journaling, and you give me a little like movement that, you know, makes me think of the work that we've done and make sure that I'm staying focused on the news stories that we've ingrained. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think that piece of integration is key to then carrying it forward into your life. How do you, so you, I mean, you've gone from woo-woo to interfaith chaplain to now finding, I mean, I'm not going to try to define it, but how do you, for people that maybe are very more religious based, what do you, because you said in your sessions you'll talk to Jesus or God, and I mean, you kind of see it. I'm going to let you talk before I pitch it.
It's not necessarily that I talk to Jesus or God. I just call him in for help.
Gotcha.
You know, it's more that, you know, come work with your brother, work with your sister, and, you know, help the healing, you know, pick up anything I miss, you know, because they're here because they want to finally let this go and live in joy. And I really believe that our job here is to live in joy.
Right. Yeah.
You know, Jesus wants that for us. God wants that for us. You know, they all the great masters want that for us. And, you know, and as we're talking, you know, and I'm explaining this shamanic healing, and I don't think it's woo-woo at all, but in a sense, people would, you know, you could describe this as woo-woo.
Right.
But it works. It works.
And I think that's the piece for me, is that it's worked better than anything else has worked for me. Like the energy work in general is, I get chills even thinking about it. It's like it releases things and gets to, I don't know, it's just pretty fabulous. So do you work with, I mean, you work with people across the board, pretty diverse.
Yep. Men, women, you know, anybody. I could work with children too, with permission of parents, but that's usually, I would do a long distance session with that. You know, because there's no time and space, so I can do these sessions on the phone. And yeah, so it just depends, you know, whoever. I don't, you know, my goal, right, or my availability right now is probably 1 or 2 clients a week, and, you know, and maybe I'd open up a Saturday, but it just really depends on what's needed. But I do want to make it clear, I'm not a shaman. My skin is way too white for that. I just do shamanic healing, and there's a difference.
Right. No,
Yeah.
Gosh, so much good stuff. So do you, for yourself, I mean, obviously you can do this work on yourself. So this is, you don't have a healer necessarily, but you know the processes to be able to take yourself through the healing.
And, you know, after all of this, and even, you know, once you finish that, the journey around the medicine wheel, that transformational journey, the personal journey, my teacher says that, you know, you can do 80% of your own work, and it's that 20% where you need to call in help, you know, and that's those are those pieces that are wrapped so tightly around your soul that you can't even see them, you know, and it's interesting, you know, because there's a piece I've been working with, you know, and it's like every now and then I'll get a whisper and it's gone. And yet people can see it. I mean, always people can see your stuff better than you can.
Right.
And this is by people, you know, especially those closest to you. So I work with a number of different shamanic practitioners. I work with my teacher if I need some. I work with people I've gone to class with. There's a school called the Four Winds Society, and this is where Alberto Fialdo, and I probably slaughtered his last name, he's my teacher's teacher, and he started the Four Winds, and he brings practitioners through his program as well. So I mean, there are shamanic practitioners all over, you know.
Well, the funny thing is, I start to talk to people. I'm comfortable in being like, okay, Gemma's the woo-woo person. She's the woo-woo friend of ours. So I get to hear it. But as I've started to tell people a little bit about, my shamanic healer, and there's a lot of interest, fascination, just, well, what are you doing exactly? And I'm like, I don't want to really fully talk about it without, I'm like, I love this conversation because I know she's moving energy. I can feel it. It's leaving. It is just life. I don't even really know how to explain it, but those things that were blocks before just feel less important or less intense. And it's just like a new story. I'm like rewriting the story of my life and how I live, basically, right?
Exactly. It's like you're rewriting your own story. It's like you've got this blank page, and this is what, in a sense, this work does. So we've got, these books where it's predestined and your story's written out in front of you. And it's like you do this work and you go back to those original contracts that you made. And we can even go back to, before you came in and incarnated in this life, the agreement you made with God. I'm going to do A, B, and C, or I'm going to experience this, and we can change that agreement. You can go back to God and change your agreement on what you want to be in life, and that's what this does. So then you've got this blank book you can rewrite. It's just like, how do you want to write your story? And so many of us don't even feel that we have that kind of power to create our own lives or what we want. We just do status quo. I'm going to grow up, go to school, go to college, get married, have 2.5 kids, and, then retire when I'm 55 and not even question it.
Yes. And almost be on autopilot too. This is how I live. And that's a cultural thing, right? We're born into that, and that's the story that we're told, but we're not taught into going back and questioning and writing the story ourselves.
Right.
So with the shamanic, what is the story they tell their children, back in Peru? What is their life view? Because I'm just curious.
They take their work very, very seriously, and then they laugh a lot in their church. I haven't personally met any. We haven't gone to Peru yet. Right. It's on my list, and I want to, meet some of these Kiro, but I know that they take their work very, very seriously.
And when you say work, I'm sorry, you've said this a few times, and I'm like, wait, what is Kiro?
Those are the medicine men and women of Peru.
Okay.
They're called the Kiro, I think.
Okay.
And please forgive me if I misspeak and whatever, she doesn't know what she's talking about, but and I could be pronouncing it wrong, but
sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know that, they work really deeply, they work with the elements, and it's energy work, and they do their healings. And then, and then they'll go back, they'll work, and then they'll play, and, I think they live very simple lives.
Right. And I think in the Western world, we're so overwhelmed with information and work and go, 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 go. And I love our culture in so many ways, but in so many ways, I feel like all of that busyness is just so heavy, and it just blurs the view of what is important. So, I think COVID, looking at this year, there's been a lot of pain, and I don't mean to downplay that, but for those of us that haven't been immediately touched by it, it's been a slowing down. It's been what is important, and I'm just going to spend time with my family and cooking beautiful meals and hiking because that's all I can do because I can't get close to anyone else. So even that has brought it back to, this is how I want life to be, this slower, more simple, way of being is, I think, where there's less fuzziness to blockas,
Yeah.
So, goodness.
It is one healing modality, and there's a plethora of healing modalities, and they all work, and, and it's not for everybody, but I believe in this one, because they call it the path of lightning, and it works fast. And I'm willing to bet if I pulled out your first sheet from notes, that we would go back and look at it and you would go, no, that's not even a thing anymore. Willing to
Right.
bet that it's just not. And I don't hold this stuff, you know. It's like you can walk out and 10 minutes later I don't remember our session. I really just don't hold it. I have to go back and look at notes and going, oh yeah, okay, you know, and I'll go over them before our next session, but I'm usually just looking at your homework and shifts and stuff and what's changed versus the other stuff.
Well, and I think that's almost even, I mean, obviously I'm Reiki 1, so I'm beginning any energy work for my, and I'm really doing it to explore other modalities of healing myself, which is what Reiki 1 is, because I think that was a fun point. Just in with all healing journeys, you have to start with yourself, right? You have to start with yourself.
You
How can you bring light to anyone else if you've got all of this bubbling and you don't know the process for yourself? So I was just thinking that before. I think so we get so busy in, and this is probably an unfair generalization, but women in taking care of everyone else, not making time for themselves. And if you can't find the time for yourself to heal yourself, to look after yourself, to nurture yourself, you can't look after other people as well.
Yeah.
You know,
And
so
I could not do this work for other people if I didn't do my own work.
right.
You know, so when something comes up, you know, I have a number of tools, I can move it, shift it. But if I don't, it's like I can only take my clients as far as I'm willing to go. So I won't be able to take you beyond where I can go until I can go there, you know, because I won't know. You know, it's like you got to go to know, I think.
No, for sure. So in talking to people, I mean, to come and see you, it is a different way of healing. It's
Yeah.
not anything that I had ever experienced before. Or I think, what would you say to people? I mean, I think they need to come open-minded and willing to go deep. And what would you say to people as, you know, you're like, are people right to come and see you, basically?
I figure if they're asking and if they show up, then they're right, you know. And I really just trust that spirit and God is going to bring who needs it
Right.
to my door. And I haven't been doing a lot of advertising and stuff, you know, because I'm vacillating, you know. It's just like, well, how do I do the work, you know, the chaplaincy work, because I love it, and do this too? Because, you know, it both are beautiful in their own right and different, but they all take time, and
Right.
I don't want to work 80 hours a week.
Oh my God, that's not helpful.
And, right. And so sometimes if I end up talking to somebody and they end up sharing a story of this thing that da 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 da, and I'm like, well, I do this work if you're interested, and I'll tell them and leave it in their court if they feel called to do it. You know, when I was training, I would just go up to people and say, hey, I'm doing this. Would you like to do some sessions with me so I can practice what I'm learning? And I got a lot of people in that. And I gave them kudos. You know, it's like, you don't even know what you're stepping into, and you're showing up in my office and onto my table. And it's been really interesting. And they've got a lot out of it. You know, I talked to one woman, and so much has changed in her life since she started coming to see me. You know, and I haven't seen her you know, in a session work, you know, since COVID started. But it's just amazing. I was just talking to her today, and I'm like, look at you. And she goes, I know.
Love that.
And she admits, had she not done this work, she wouldn't be where she is right now.
No, for sure. Well, and even when I started to come to see you, I'm fascinated in energy work, and I didn't have anything huge that, well, huge. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
obviously, all like that's the human journey, is taking on things and then being like, okay, let's flesh it out because that's not working. But I mean, I've seen you 3, 4 times, and it's always something. And I think, I mean, that, like, I keep saying the human journey, but we're onions, right? There's always, you peel back layers and there's more layers to peel back. And that's the goal of life. So I think even coming to you, if it fascinates someone, or like if it's intriguing anyway, I think, well, feel if you're called to it, and if so, reach out to Jen. So
Yeah.
it's, oh, it's awesome. So Jen, how do Jennifer, I'm sorry, um,
Okay. Yeah.
how do people find you?
Well, that's a good question. Hopefully word of mouth. I do have a website, but it's more for my weddings, but it is www.simplicityinspirit.com.
Okay.
And I hope to broaden that, but all my contact information is on that page. But it does, it is just geared towards the weddings that I officiate.
Okay, perfect.
But at least my contact information is there, email, phone number, and so.
And I'll put that in our show notes. But then of course people can message me. I'm sure most people.
And honestly, I could give my phone number too. I don't have any problem with that. So
Okay.
yeah.
So just in wrapping up, I mean, you've had a lot of amazing people in your life and on your journey as you've been led along your path so far. So what 3 people locally inspire you on your holistic living journey, as I like to call it?
My holistic living journey. Well, Berta Canal, my teacher in Sandpoint, she definitely inspires me. She was, kind of got me on this path and totally changed my life.
Does she still teach?
She does. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep. She's on Balanced Horizons. So I think it's a website, probably balancedhorizons.com.
Okay.
And I know it might sound, a little biased, but my husband, he totally inspires me. That man does more work on himself than anybody I've ever met. And when I met him, he's like, I'm on this journey path of healing and all of this. And he's like, so I don't care what you do, but you have to be doing something to be working on yourself or we'll just grow like this. And, and he goes, and that's fine. But if you want to walk this path with me, and I'm like, I get it. And so I didn't jump on this path to date him. I jumped on it, for me, and we just ended up still together. So
can I ask what his modality of choice is?
He does the shamanic healing as well, and he's also a massage therapist. Okay. So yeah.
Nice.
3.
No pressure, but
no pressure. See, and I feel like really, really new to this community in a sense too. There's a lot of amazing people here, and I also work a lot. And then when I get home, it's like, I don't go out much.
Oh, I hear you, which is why I'm on this journey. I'm like, I want to know these people that I don't know yet.
Yeah, that I don't know yet. I know. I want to know a lot of people I don't know yet.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I guess we'll just leave it at that for now.
Needy.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. I have 2 more questions. Usually I wrap up with that, but I was thinking, would you mind sharing what is your practice? Like, what does a weekly practice look like for you, if you don't mind sharing?
I don't mind sharing. Sometimes it depends on the week, and I admit I've been a little bit slacking, but I've picked it up. I've been reading a lot about like 5-minute, workouts, breath work things, that kind of thing. So I've been doing my breath work in the morning, and that is a really big key. I work with, and that is actually, like I said, Berta's teacher, Alberto, he went out and he spent 25 years in the Amazon, but he also pulled in a lot of stuff, like this breath work, I know is a yoga tradition. And, so he pulls in that. So we work, so I will do that. I spend a lot of time in gratitude. And another thing I've been doing just recently is planning my day before it goes. How do I want to feel throughout my day? Yeah. I've been very tired, and I've been telling that story for 3 or 4 years now. I'm tired. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be tired anymore. So I've started my day out. I'm like, thank you for all the energy that I need for today and the vitalities to walk through my days and meet everybody that I meet so I can work with them for their greatest and highest good. And I ask God to move through me as me to meet these people. And that's been my prayer. So those are some of the things I've been doing. I get outside. I'm definitely a hiker and a biker, and I if I do one thing, you know, risky thing in COVID-19 days, it's I've been going to the gym and working out and just doing a couple classes a week and just absolutely loving it.
Right.
So those have been some of the things that I've been doing to take care of myself. And then when a piece comes up, I call somebody and I do a work. You know, if I need a session, I will call somebody else to do a session on me.
Yeah. Well, and I think even with our sessions, doing it as it comes up, because this year has been pretty intense for me as doing my own inner work. But in between those times, you've always been so great. Like you'll know when you need to. It's not just this over digging, what am I doing, what's triggering me? Like it's not like that at all. It's kind of settling, doing the work, and then living your life and having your daily practices to connect with your source, with your purpose, whatever that is. But letting it settle and letting yourself be, not just
integrating. Yeah, you want to integrate those pieces, those beautiful gifts that you have, and then grow back. And you know, it's just really, you know, it's one of those things. It's just like, come and try a session and see what it does for you, you know, and just give it, you know, just give it a go. Because there's so much in it. It's really hard to explain. You know, we have an intake, we have table work, and then we have the exit. You know, and so much happens in that 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. But I know you walk out the door feeling completely different than you walked in.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you've traveled. I mean, you were in India, you love world traveling too. So I think even just having a session with you, it opens your eyes to other, like, as in our culture, it's easy for us to be in our Western culture because our Western culture is big and loud and fun, but there's other ways of being and healing and living that sometimes, quite honestly, feel more nurturing. And that's me speaking as someone that really enjoys this kind of work and Eastern, you know, ways of living. But I think that is having a session, if nothing else, just to open your eyes to a lot of different ways.
How you can live your best life, you know, and I guess that's it. It's just like opening yourself up to really living and being the best you, or being that you called in to be. Because we only have a short time on this earth, you know, we really do. And whether or not you believe in multiple lives or living more than one life, it doesn't matter, because as Jennifer Hackenbruch, this is it. I have one life to live. It's Gemma Putty. You have, this is it for you. You know, this is your one life. And do you want to be happy? Do you want to be sad? And I'll admit it, you know, I was depressed coming into this work, you know, and it was a depression that had carried on for years. It would get better and then it would go down and up. And I would do a really good job at masking it and putting on the whole facade that everything is great and blah, blah, blah. And I can honestly say, you know, and it took time, like peeling back that onion, I'm not depressed anymore, and that I have a zest for life and I want to be here and live and express. And
yeah, well, and I think, I mean, you know, I was pretty brutal to myself for a long time, and maybe brutal is too harsh of a word, but I mean, being the bully in your own head, even whether it's, you know, it's not, I've said, you don't want to live with a bully. Like, you get to choose to live with yourself, as a best friend or as a bully. And why would you choose a bully? And some of it isn't extreme, but having those stories that you've taken on from your youth there's another way of living, and that zest for life, vibrancy for living, that's a thing that we can all experience. I really, truly believe that if you do the work.
Yeah. And then going back, you know, where I started with that triangle of disempowerment. I mean, we play the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer in our head more than we ever play it anywhere else in our lives. You know, that bully, that perpetrator, you know, and then what do you do to, like, you know, the victim does, and then what does the rescuer do to save the victim? And it's crazy. And you're like, blah, 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 blah. We're mad minds. Totally no.
Well, and this even just gives you that perspective to sit back and realize what's happening. Like, I'm sure that even that concept is, people should Google it, because there's a lot more to the triangle, but to realize that you have, I mean, it sounds crazy to say it, but those voices in your head that are playing the roles, that none of them are empowering to you. I
can't believe you just did that. Did you really just do that or say that? And that whole beating up of,
Yeah, it's real. That's the human experience, right? We get
yeah.
to figure out how to thrive and work with living in this planet, which I needed to do, like being rooted in this planet while also being connected to the divine.
I remember that.
Yeah.
But that's just it. So that's, I like what you said. It's like changing your mind so you're like, that voice is your best friend.
Yeah.
Instead of your enemy. And we would never say to our friends or tell our girlfriends what we say to ourselves in our head, ever.
No,
and men do the same thing. This isn't just a female thing.
Right.
So.
Oh, well, I feel like that's a beautiful way to wrap this up. Do you have anything else you wanted to add before we close?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I hope my hope is that they have a really good idea. You all have a really good idea of this work, and it's beautiful and wonderful. And
yeah, for sure. And if you have more questions, anyone, give me comments, and maybe we'll get Jennifer back to ask her more questions, because I'm thinking already, I'm like, oh, I could talk to her about this, and I don't really understand, and I need to, but for today, I'll wrap it at that. So thank you again, Jennifer, for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun and a new experience for me. So.